Yeah, so I love the angle you were taking there, Quentin. Like, really, it sounds to me like two big things that we often talk about in teacher training courses, whether that be CELTA, the one I have most experience, probably the most well-known TEFL course in the world. Two big areas, really, when you're just getting started, is this idea of classroom management, and you focusing on there how you kind of set up the space, whether it be virtual or physical. Like, it's the same, I guess, headspace that you need to be in. Like, if you're in the physical space, how are your even just the fact of how your seat's set up, have you set it up in a horseshoe shape? Have you set it up in what's called lockstep? Have you set it up in little pods? And then what is that conducive to? If you have it in little pods of 4, maybe that's really conducive to what's called like task-based learning. Whereas if you have it set up in the horseshoe shape, maybe that's better for what's called a situational presentation of language, where the teacher might demonstrate a situation and from there elicit target language. The same is absolutely true for the virtual space. Even, if you look at what I was doing in this little activity, thinking about the breakout rooms. Okay, my numbers are here. I've got 4 people. So we're going to do 2 and 2. If I had bigger numbers, what I normally do is make groups, let's say groups of 3, and then nominate a person prior to feedback to be like the spokesperson for that activity. That helps conversations become very focused, and it actually ups the interaction or communicative focus of activities. If you think about more than just, okay, they're going to be in pairs or groups, but then what is the role of each person in their groups? And then the other aspect that you brought up there about engaging your students, getting them to share a little bit of themselves, and even yourself as a teacher, you don't need to tell your life story or whatever, but a little bit of personalization, it helps to make rapport. When you have rapport, then you have your students on side, you're on their side, everybody's on each other's side, and you're all moving in the same direction. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Quentin. I really appreciate it. How about Neil? Could you tell us, well, I know who you were speaking to, but could you introduce your partner, please, and just tell us a little bit about your conversation? And you're on mute. It always happens.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
No,
I get
my
told
partner,
5 times a day, Fergus, you're on mute. Come off mute. It's just like part of the age we live in. We're always in mute when we start talking. Take it away, Neil.
So my partner was John,
Mm-hmm.
and we focused on, he spoke about the purpose of the mutual interaction, which would be memorization. I think he spoke about memorization quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Episodic memory, trying to remember exactly what the next person would say in the classroom as the teacher. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And how about what would be your own perspective as well? I'll come back to that in a second, John, about the memorization. But what would be your own perspective on the purpose of these stages? And
well, my own perspective would be the lead-in is to introduce one another, to
mm-hmm.
meet, and just to get to know one another, yourself and the student, with the purpose of then getting into discussing the topic of the day, and always remembering to listen to what one another says. Yeah.
Oh, this is really insightful, this last point. Sometimes as teachers, we get extremely focused on our lesson plan or the activities, and we also get very focused on wanting the students to get the right answers, because if they get the wrong answers, then that's going to be a little bit more of a stressful situation, and we might get ourselves into murky water trying to correct them. It can often be a source of anxiety for new teachers, especially, if the students get it wrong, or if there's errors, how will I explain it? Could I run the risk of, the wheels falling off the bus of my lesson, etc. And a huge part of what's called in language teaching, but all teaching really, is what's called language awareness. And language awareness is different from knowledge of language. And what I mean by language awareness is, you know, if you have a student who's saying, yesterday I have been to the cinema, like you understand them perfectly, but there's a little, like as I was saying, linguistics, like there's a taste, there's something wrong there, and you can't really put your finger on what's wrong because it sounds pretty much right. I have been to the cinema yesterday, like, yeah, but I can't really put my finger on what's wrong with that. The awareness comes when you can say, yeah, well, the student should have said, yesterday I went to the cinema, or I was at the cinema, and this thing I have been, maybe that's coming from a lot of first languages. You can make that construction, have plus been, and it just means the past. Whereas in English, we usually use it to talk about experiences, like I've been to the United States, I've been to South Africa. Like those sentences sound okay. They don't have that weird kind of sensation of it's right but it's wrong kind of thing. And that's that awareness, just to tie it back to what you were saying there, it really comes from truly listening to your students and being open to what they say, and knowing as a teacher, okay, I have to make an intervention here because the student said I've been to the cinema yesterday, because the whole lesson was about practicing how do we use the past. Or on the other hand, we were just doing introductions. We were just chatting and sharing, you know, warming up. We weren't really doing any grammar practice. So it would be strange of me to, you know, I'm just chit-chatting with the student, and then all of a sudden I start correcting their grammar. Like that seems kind of rude. Yeah. Actually, you know, like they were just telling me about their day, and here I am correcting their grammar. Like, stop that. Yeah. So again, this awareness of like the appropriateness of, for example, error correction, and then what the error is and how to correct it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It comes from exactly what you were saying about like truly listening to the students, and listening beyond what we expect them to say and what we hope that they say, et cetera. But again, that comes with time and experience, you know, like, because we have to kind of believe in our own abilities of being able to respond in a helpful and not waffly way to the students, you know, like, and I'll hold my hand up, you know, my early days as a teacher, I actually did some teaching even before I was trained. I had experience of being that, like, oh, I don't know what the answer is, and just making something up or waffling my way to an answer, because I felt, well, I'm a native speaker of English, I should know the answer to this, but I just didn't, you know, I didn't have that knowledge, and I didn't have that awareness that grows and comes from, as you say, listening. But I just want to ask, just before I jump on, thank you so much for that, Neo, by the way. Yes. John, what was your point about memorization? What were your angle there?
I was thinking about episodic memory. So this episodic memory of introductions creates an environment of the students gaining building a community amongst each other through the skill of learning the language. When you introduce yourself in a more simpler term, and they enjoy learning about you, building your repertoire, you build an environment of people recognizing like a pattern of every day when you go to class, they talk about their day for like 2 minutes.
Oh, so right on.
Yeah, so this episodic memory further prolongs their development in the language when they recall being happy and learning something.
Sure.
Learn something about someone else, and then they develop this the language skill through the simple act of communicating without worrying too much about the mistakes.
Yeah. That's huge. I was recently in Brazil, and I was speaking to a friend of mine when I was in Brazil about how I learned Portuguese. I used to live in Brazil years ago, and I went back for a visit. And you know, I consider myself a pretty successful language teacher. I'm not the greatest student or in class, because I always wanted to get out in the street or go to parties or whatever and just try my bad Portuguese in those environments, and it eventually, and you know, really, you know, the answer is a mix of both. But in the kind of more social environments, yeah, I didn't care about making mistakes, you know, like, and I said some really weird stuff, and I still say weird stuff when I'm speaking Portuguese, but you know, thankfully, my Brazilian friends are very patient with my gringo Portuguese, and we, it actually, in the end, it brings us kind of closer because, oh, you said it that way, here's the right way to say it, or that was a funny way that you said that, etc. But I think, the other point you were talking about, the episodic part to memory, I would kind of even zoom out and see that from a almost human nature point of view, that we all respond well to when we have a kind of a routine. So if there is that part at the start of your lessons where it's not going to be straight into like grammar rules or hard pronunciation, where we're just going to like, yeah, how was your weekend? What did you get up to this morning? And that little bit of personalization. Who are you as a person?
Yeah.
In teaching, I often spend a long time with trainees or clients through my YouTube and consultancy, talking about there are two types of feedback that we can give to our students. One kind of feedback is called linguistic feedback, and the other kind of feedback is called content feedback. So, just as before, when I was giving that example, when I asked the student, hey, what were you up to yesterday? And they said, I've been to the cinema. If I were to give them content feedback, it would be like, oh, what did you see? Because I'm responding to the content of what they said. Whereas if they said, I've been to the cinema, and I said, actually, I went to the cinema. First of all, I'll be extremely patronizing and annoying, but also what I would be doing there would be giving linguistic feedback. And you can see, actually, that's actually the basis. If you look at a lot of like any comedy routine, that's often the kind of the structure of a joke, just responding in the wrong kind of way to what's being asked of you. Like that kind of mismatch, like it's just weird for a person to start correcting your grammar when you're talking about going to the cinema, right?
Yeah.
However, if you have just done a gap fill activity to look at the difference between those two grammars, they're called present perfect and past simple, for example, it would be completely appropriate for me to, if you said have been as opposed to was, it would be completely appropriate. So that awareness of the right kind of feedback is also something that we can consider when we get into, planning, not just the lead into our lessons, but really every stage of our lesson, because that's a big part of what we're doing as a teacher, right? Giving feedback on what students are doing. We're doing a bunch of other things, of course, like monitoring and giving instructions, being a guide, etc. But a big thing that we're doing is looking at what the students have done in class and giving like our expert feedback on it. Like that's really why we're there, and they're not just learning from the course book by themselves, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, if we just continue on, I want to let you know a few things, and a few more things to say, but I want to just get a few things out of the way in the 10 minutes we have left. So I'm going to send you all of these materials afterwards. This call that we're on, as I mentioned to you, I'll make it available to you privately. I'll also, I usually make available the last one or two calls as well with just exactly the same kind of thing as this. Just if you're interested in seeing what other people are talking about as well, I think it's just a good way to grow a community. And speaking of a community, I do have a community that is separate from social media and separate from anything that's going to be kind of like advertising at you. And I'll send you this so that you can read through it. But the whole purpose behind this was to create a community hosted by yourself, but in collaboration with people like on our call today, Antonia, who has been through this process. So it's not just coming from me, but coming from a person who has worked in TEFL for a long time, who has done CELTA, who has experience of different parts of the world. Whoops. So as I mentioned to you, I've lived in all these places: France, Spain, Brazil, South Africa, United States, Canada, my native Ireland. And I visited and worked in digital nomad as a digital nomad in places such as Antarctica. I actually took this photo on Christmas Day. And this large ship down here is about 1.5 kilometers away from me. And the ship itself is about another kilometer off the coast here. That's just to give you a sense of, anyway. It's always nice just to share a little bit of beauty of the world that we live in, I think, nonetheless. But it also reminds me as well, you know, life, there's a big life out there for living and kind of endless adventure. And I think these questions that we come into these conversations about teaching, and whether that be in our own locality or if it is based on an idea that you want to get out there in the world and kind of do like I did and go to far-flung places all over the world. I think that these kinds of conversations and thinking about teaching, TEFL, CELTA, being an online coach, they all kind of coalesce in the same kind of conversation like we're having right now. So yeah, again, you can read through this in detail when I send it to you in an email afterwards, but in my kind of website, in my website members area, this is the kind of thing you get. So this call that you're on, it's actually the last one that I'll be setting up in this way. From now on, these calls will be just through my website. Only the user interface there is so much better, and the way to access previous recordings and other materials, et cetera, it's just all in one place, and it's not emails here and Google Drives there and this and that all over the place. Also, you know, I do have various courses. Myself and Antonia work on various courses to offer you, and as members, you do get reductions on those. There's a whole bunch of training challenges. I'll show you those in a moment. Private members only forum. That's really the biggest part, and that is kind of broken down by topic. So you'll have parts in there that are only for TEFL and CELTA, only for being a digital nomad, only for learning and development and coaching and those kinds of things. So you can really find a community for really what brought you here in the first place. We'll have member spotlights and success stories from time to time, people that I work with, and Antonia will be one of those people who I've worked with in the past, will be joining me for Q&A sessions with specific focuses. For example, various aspects of teacher training courses, finding work post and life post CELTA. Antonia is going to talk to us about that in a little bit, just about that, the life after CELTA. And I'm going to share a link with you now. There's no commitment really. You just sign up and you get 7 days for free, and you can cancel it if it's not for you before that. So, you know, it's not a huge investment. I just have some more information there, which is basically just a written version of what I've just been saying for the last 3 or 4 minutes. So you'll receive that afterwards. And yeah, there's a little video where I show the community here, and in the materials you will be able to use QR code or the join button. So I'll just show you this community real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Can you hear it?
No, the sound is not available.
Oh, the sound is not available. Oh, I thought I was super prepared. I had checked that the sound should come through. Okay, no problem. I'm going to send that as part of a email to you. And really all it's doing is showing you, where is it? Wrong spot. Wrong spot. Let me just get this up 1 second. The video there is just showing my community and how you can access it. Okay, doesn't want to start up for me. That's fine. So I'll send this to you in an email afterwards. But you can see there's sections down here where you can talk about CELTA, digital nomad, learning and development, etc. And you'll have various links there where you'll be able to join my calls going forward. So just, you know, I mentioned at the beginning we would talk about your questions, and I just kind of tried to bring them all together in some topics here that we've been talking about. So a lot of people reach out to me because of CELTA or TEFL. A good way to think about what is the difference between CELTA and TEFL, you know, if you think about, I always use an analogy like sport. You know, I think about the sport of basketball. You know, people played basketball all over the world, and there are many leagues. There's a league in my country, in Ireland. There is actually a basketball league in Ireland. There's a few basketball leagues in different countries around the world, but everybody has heard of the NBA. Everybody has heard of, you know, Michael Jordan and the NBA, and that's the most famous basketball league in the world. It's the biggest basketball league. It is the biggest kind of market share. If anybody, you know, if I want to go and say, yeah, I'm a basketball pro, and they're like, okay, cool. But if I say I'm a basketball pro and I've played in the NBA, they'll be, oh, really? I know what the NBA is. I know for sure the standard to get into the NBA is like the top. Whereas, you know, there are other leagues around the world that the standard is just as high, but it's not as big a league. Like in Spain, there's a great basketball league, and some great players come out of there. But just, I don't know that much about the Spanish league. So the same is true here. TEFL is like saying basketball, and CELTA is like saying NBA. Okay, you could get some great TEFL courses. Maybe the TEFL course you've done is every bit as good as CELTA. Maybe it is. But it's just that whether you go to Tokyo, Cape Town, Rio de Janeiro, New York, and let's put another very famous city in that list, Dublin, Ireland, everybody will know CELTA in all of those places, right? Whereas your TEFL course, maybe. You know, I work in this industry, and I know about it, you know. Different countries have some different regulations. In my own country, in Ireland, the profession of being an English language teacher, it's regulated. Here in Canada, it's also regulated. So there's a list of acceptable courses if you want to work in an academy. And CELTA is almost always going to be on those lists if it is regulated. Who's it for? A lot of people come to me asking this question. I'm actually just in the process of editing a video to put on my YouTube channel about this. But really, I'll just capitulate it all into one short sentence. You got to look at your life, and you got to look at things like, what's your financial situation like? These courses, they're not cheap. Right? You're going to, if it's CELTA you do, it's going to be something on the order of about $2,500, something like that. TEFL courses tend to be a bit cheaper, not a huge amount cheaper, depending on which course you go for. And then it's just a question of, you know, what's going on in your life? Do you have family? Do you have, you know, bills to pay, responsibilities? Do you have people depending on you? You know, so some people ask me, Fergus, what is the right course for me to do? All I can do is guide you to think about those things in a, you know, responsible adult way. And I can tell you things like, yeah, there is a kind of a sliding scale from the like best, you know, bang for your buck all the way down to, you know, I would avoid that. However, you know, I've asked Antonia to join me for these calls, and Antonia is somebody who has done CELTA. Like this course that I'm saying is the NBA of courses. Yet that doesn't mean that everybody who goes to the NBA is going to be, you know, Michael Jordan. Or so I'll stop my bad analogy there, and I'll just hand it over to Antonia. If you'd just like to talk to us just for a couple of minutes, Antonia, what was your experience with CELTA, and what's life after a course like CELTA like?
First, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. Well, completing the CELTA course was a very challenging experience. I struggled a lot with balancing lesson plan, teaching, practicing, preparing lesson and writing assignments. Yeah, because the CELTA course, focus on teaching adults. Yeah, so that's its focus. It was an intensive process that required a great deal of dedication and resilience. And I remember that throughout that journey, I had the support of Fergus, who provide me valuable coaching and guidance because, his insights and encouragement were very important to keep me motivated and focused because I had considered quitting that course. It was a lot for me, but I knew that was very important as well. And life after CELTA isn't a bed of roses. So last month, I applied for a position for an international institution here in my country. But unfortunately, I wasn't selected to join their team. But I mean, it was like, although I got kind of disappointed, it makes me remind of myself that it has been only 2 months since I completed the course. I still have a lot of things to process, to internalize and refine from everything I learned. And I've been thinking and considering, developing my teaching skills, and I'm seriously considering taking the Delta course. 2 years time to be able to deepen my understanding and refine my techniques that I learned, taking the CELTA course. And I know this journey doesn't stop with the CELTA, yeah, because there is always a room for growth and improvement. This is only the beginning, I'm sure.
Thank you, Antonia. And I
Pleasure.
I really love, well, I've always enjoyed our working together, but I love the I guess the honesty that you're showing there, that, yeah, as to quote you, it's not a bed of roses. I often say to people as well, I have a lot of videos on my channel about how to get an A in CELTA, but I always tell people I didn't get an A myself. However, about 6 months after I finished my CELTA course, I was on the level of an A. I just needed a bit more time. I've always been that kind of student. I don't get like the A, right out of the, right from the beginning. I just need a bit more time. That's the way the Lord made me, like that's just the way it is with me. And that's okay, However, it didn't mean that I could just say, okay, I can take my time now because I just take longer. No, I still had to work really hard on my course, but it just took some time, and, in the long run, it's been super beneficial. And then, I do talk about this in other courses, and we'll be talking about it a lot in the community. Courses like TEFL and CELTA in particular, everybody focuses in on the letter E there, which is English and teaching English. But a lot of people forget about the letter A in CELTA, which is adults. And that was the thing, that was the light bulb moment for me, and basically changed my whole career and opened up basically a world of opportunity and a world of adventure. But when you realize the A is adults and you realize what CELTA is, it's an adult education course. And then you can begin to apply those principles from teaching English to adults. You can begin to apply those same principles. Like my 9 to 5 here in Canada is actually, I don't teach English anymore. I teach lawyers how to use computers in a law firm. And I'm not an IT expert. I actually do have a degree in law, but I never practiced law, and that was not requisite for this job. All I needed to do was look at, okay, in a grammar lesson, I present the grammar, we practice it, and then we produce it. Maybe if I pull out the grammar and just put the legal software in that framework, it'll work. And guess what? It does work. So, this life after CELTA thing, it's not, or life after TEFL, it's not just this one track of only teaching English. And this is something I focus on. Yes, start in English, but then you start to branch out into teaching exam English. Then you start to branch out into teaching what's called ESP, English for specific purposes, like teaching business English, or as I did for many years, teaching legal English, or teaching English for, get this one, aviators. I did that for a few months. That was very interesting, teaching air traffic controllers from the Czech Republic specific language. It was a great experience. But then going from there into what's called instructional design, I do a lot of that these days, creating learning materials for adults and training courses, etc. So, you know, these certificates, they can do a lot for you. Some countries, as I mentioned, you know, these are just examples: France, Ireland, Finland, Canada, United States is like that as well. Well, it's state by state in the US, how it's regulated and what kind of certification you need. You know, there's obviously big advantages to those who want to teach online, teaching abroad. Myself and Antonia were just speaking about her city where I was visiting recently, Sao Paulo in Brazil. It's, depending how you look at it, it's nearly 30 million people, and the traffic in there can be intense. So if you can work online, well, then maybe you don't have to sit in traffic for 3 or 4 hours a day. You know, that could make a big difference to your life. So that's it, everyone. I'm going to follow up today with all of these slides, an email with a bit more information, links over there to how you can, in fact, let me just drop this link into the chat. Here's how you get part of that community. This is what I was trying to show before. So you see there's a completely free version, and then there's this version here that's $9.99 a month. It's got 7 days for free. So it's also free, but short term. So have a look at that. I will follow up with an email and links to the recording of this call. The last thing I often ask people to do, if it's okay for you, can I take a screenshot selfie of us just to commemorate the moment, to send back to you and put it on the little thumbnail of our video? So I take 4 or 5, so just in case, because I'm always blinking or pulling a really weird face, or just, well, yeah, that's just me being me. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to meet you all. I have to run now. I have a band practice with a Latin salsa band that I play in, starting in my living room in 7 minutes. So I've got 10 people from Venezuela and Colombia and Mexico and El Salvador coming here. So I got to run. It was a pleasure meeting you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to keeping in contact. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.